Hello, and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We talk everything animation here, including BoJack Horseman, which we'll be talking about tonight. I'm your host, Alex Bonilla, and today I'm joined by Michelle Anderer.
Hello.
Sarah Potter.
Hello.
And April Collins.
Hi there.
Today we are going to talk about the first two episodes of the latest season of BoJack Horseman that released on Netflix. You can find more about this podcast, including our previous full season discussion on BoJack Horseman at overlyanimated.com. You can also subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app by searching for Overly Animated. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/overlyanimated. And wherever you listen to us, we appreciate any ratings and reviews you want to leave us. But yeah, today we are beginning our episode by episode discussions. As mentioned, Overly Animated previously did a full season discussion, but now we're gonna go a little bit more into details on each of the episodes. This particular group, we're beginning with the first two episodes with A Horse Walks into a Rehab and The New Client. So we'll probably do our usual episode by beat by beat breakdown and talk about points that maybe stood out to us. But we'll begin with general thoughts on these two episodes. Is there something specific that stood out to you, or just your general feelings on it? Sarah, let's go to you first. Do you have a preference of these two episodes, or something in particular that stood out to you the most of this beginning of the season?
I definitely liked the first episode more than the second, just because, as I discussed in the other podcast, I just didn't connect as much to the child stuff. I didn't connect to as much the struggle with having a child that Princess Carolyn has, and just because I don't really want kids, and so it was just harder for me to relate to that on a level. But also, episode 1 is just really good. It has this really, I think the thing that really stands out for me most in episode 1 is this really cool flashback technique they keep using, where every time they flash back, it's just BoJack getting younger and younger and younger with the alcohol, and it just each time it just feels more and more depressing, and I just really, really enjoy that a lot.
Okay, you enjoy watching something very depressing. That is the standard view of a BoJack fan, so I agree with that. April, what are your general thoughts on these two episodes?
So I really like these episodes. The first episode is just extremely strong and very, very powerful. And even though, Sarah, I can't necessarily relate to the second episode, I still thought it was beautifully executed. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed this technique they had of sort of Princess Carolyn running around all over the place, but there's still a focus on her, if that kind of makes sense. So I thought that was really really unique, and I won't lie, I was really annoyed by the I guess the sort of I don't know, song beat that they kept using, but I think that's kind of the point of it as well, was to be annoyed by it. So but yeah, I thought these were two very, very strong episodes of this beginning of the season. So the first one I was immediately hyped after. I was like, all right, we're here. Let's keep going. So and I agree with all of the super depressing elements as well, because it especially because they sort of tie into oh, BoJack, one was your first drink of alcohol, and these are probably all specific memories of his quote unquote first drink. So I thought that was really cool. I liked that.
Okay, thanks, April. Michelle, how about you? What are your general feelings on these two eps?
I liked both of these episodes a lot too. I think it did so much for me to see BoJack trying to actually be a good person, and feeling like it was a genuine potential shift for him for real this time, because this is the 6th season that BoJack just hasn't been having a great time, and BoJack has a lot of really terrible baggage. But having said that, I still want him to do better and be a better person and come to face all of his demons. And this looks like the beginning of a potential for that to really happen. So I really liked the first episode for that reason. I also think it's pretty interesting that all those moments we see of BoJack drinking are not good memories. I think there's potentially something to be said for the fact that maybe BoJack, like, we've never really seen BoJack like have a drink just for fun and have it be fine. It seems like a lot of his memories are just like Sarah was saying, it gets from like kind of not great to really devastating the younger those flashbacks go down. And I think it's an interesting choice that his memories of drinking are all really negative memories. And what does that say about what alcoholism has been for him in his life? I really like the Princess Carolyn episode too. I love like April was saying, the fact that we see like Princess Carolyn running around and like attempting to do all these things, even though like I'm not totally sure if she like actually did all those things or if it's like her imagination of all things she should be doing at any one given moment. But I like the conversation she had with her arch nemesis just about like, is it bad to not love your kid when they're so difficult and hard and demanding all the time? And the kind of knowledge that, oh, well, you know, just treat them like a client. You love them and want them to do okay, but also they're a lot of work and you just got to do the best you can, even if it's not perfect. Because I do think that episode was uplifting for Princess Carolyn, and she's a character I care a lot about and have a lot of personal investment in, and she deserves a win. Life has not always been kind to her. And I do think this episode ended on an uplifting note for her. Like, I do think even if she can't quite hashtag like have it all right now, I get the impression she could figure it out and that she will figure it out. And that's like a relief to me. So I enjoyed both these episodes. I thought they were genuinely very good.
Nice. I would briefly sharing my thoughts. I would agree that Horse Walks into a Rehab is a very good setup episode for the season. The flashback parts are kind of the highlight, and you know, you got in between the BoJack settling into rehab, and there are parts of that definitely hit home, and other parts that maybe feel like they drag. But like for a setup episode, like BoJack historically, episode ones have not been. They start slow to set up the rest of the season's hard hitters, and I think that falls into this category. But it's still a really good episode. And
really, I think this is like one of the best episodes of the entire season. Honestly, episode 1.
Oh, that highly? Okay.
Yeah, no, I think this is like between this episode. This episode is just really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I want to. We've talked in our opening thoughts about. Well, I'll just with the new client. Also, I really loved it. I thought it was very creative, and we'll talk a bit more about how it uses that. But I guess while we're on episode 1, when talking about episode 1, we kind of specifically talk about the alcoholism flashbacks, and I do think those are very impressive, and also like just the general presentation of them. You got like the burning film as we go back in time through his story, but the framing around it as well of him actually being in rehab and struggling to get used to it and slowly figuring out that he can help others with his experience. So like that. Well, I don't think it's as flashy as the alcoholism flashbacks, but I do think that those parts as well, or surrounding it, contribute to this being a very solid episode. The fact that, as Michelle mentioned, like it is a visible showing of BoJack's difference in how he carries himself compared to previous seasons. Sarah, I don't know how you feel about aside from the flashback parts of the episodes, like what makes this episode really strong, considering you came out with a take of like this is one of the better episodes of the season. Like, what else about it stands out to you?
I just want to make sure I don't think I'm still going to talk about them, but I forget. Are we allowed to mention spoilers for the rest of the season?
As of now, we are now talking spoilers for the rest of the season.
Okay, I just want to make
yeah. But look, you got our general impressions. We like these episodes, so now you can watch them if you haven't watched them yet. But now rest of the season, go. Okay,
because I'm not going to generally be talking about the rest of the episodes, but it's just like this whole season is very thematic. Like, there's not a lot of like I think a lot of this season is about characters actively trying to be better, and the things specifically overcoming them inwards. Like, there's a lot of this inward struggle. Like, this season really puts aside all the stuff that BoJack has done to the rest of the world, like killing people, like actively hurting people, and just focus on how BoJack feels about himself, how Princess Carolyn feels about herself and her child, how Diane feels about herself and her depression. Like, it's all about those things. And this first episode is just that. It's just the entire season's like thesis statement as an episode, and it doesn't give us an answer, which I like. And it's just, I think besides the flashbacks to the alcohol, just the entire thing with Sarah Lynn, this idea that BoJack is affected by Sarah Lynn's death, but it's almost in like it's not about Sarah Lynn, it's about how she made him feel, like, for him right now. Like, he's looking at the alcohol, he sees those stars from the planetarium, and I think that's a really great effect. I think that's really cool use of animation to have that happen every time he looks at something he doesn't, like, he craves but he doesn't want. Like, I don't think it happens with alcohol mostly, but I think at some points in the season it happens with other things. But it happens a lot in this first episode, and it's almost just like he's using this traumatic experience. He's like weaponizing a traumatic experience that he put on someone else to stop himself from doing something. And it just feels kind of weird and very BoJack, and just, there's a lot of layers to it. And I really like it a lot.
Okay, very good. April, I don't know if you want to chime in on how this episode deals with, or how it's framing BoJack's view of where he's at in his life.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah that I really enjoyed like the effect of the stars, and because I watched the entire like season, and then I came back to these two episodes, and so I remember the first time that I was watching it, I was really sort of confused. I was like, oh, we're talking about Sarah Lynn again, and then like that's something that continues throughout the rest of the season, and that's what we sort of open up on too. So I think that's like a really good sort of like foreshadowing of what something that we will be focusing on throughout the rest of these episodes. And then of course, like, we have like the Jameson character, who's sort of like I guess like a new or a modern like Sarah Lynn. And so I think that tie-in really I think that's something that I thought it was a really good tie-in, and sort of a correlation between Sarah Lynn and like even like with the talking to her dad, like, and seeing like how he genuinely cares, that Jameson's kind of like making shit up almost, especially about like the baby. Like, that was so devastating to do. But I also think it's funny that we have like these moments with BoJack, and like the Dr. Champ says, like, you can leave, like, at any point. Like, here's the gate code. Like, help yourself. Like, you're welcome to go. And then we sort of, like, we see that, like, a couple of times as well. So I thought that was kind of a really great, like, we're just sort of, like, continuing to touch back on things that they sort of give us. So, and just kind of, like, it's like a reflection of like, oh, like you can easily give advice, but you can't take it so much yourself. So I liked that sort of small message inside of there. Plus, it was fun whenever we got to, like, I thought the 5-way call was
yeah,
I thought that was so great, like, especially because like, like, you go into the episode and you're like, oh, this is just a BoJack episode, and it was, but I like that, like, we got to like touch base with all of like the main characters that we know and care about. So I really liked that, like, BoJack goes to Diane first, and then like reluctantly like reaches out to Todd, and then we go to Princess Carolyn, and then we go to Mr. Peanutbutter, and then like we just like make our way back to BoJack. So I thought that was really great. And also, those are kind of the characters that we explore in the upcoming episodes as well. So I think that was extremely effective, especially like coming back to the episode.
And I think that's the only scene in this entire season where the main cast is even like in it together. Like, other than that, they're all like just like, they're all at like in the wind essentially across the country even.
Yeah, well, and a lot of like the sort of, I mean, we see like BoJack and Diane together And we see BoJack and Mr. Peanutbutter, but those are the only two real. I don't remember, and I could be wrong.
Episode 4 has a little bit of interaction, but it's always like in like bursts. Like they're making little jokes to each other, but there's not really like any real talking happening. Like they're doing like combat.
It's like a phone conversation, or something like very brief. So,
which is funny because the 5-way call seems like more than just a phone conversation in comparison.
Yeah. So I thought that was like just really nice, you know. Like again, like I really liked knowing, like, oh, like going back, I was like, oh, this is where we're heading. Like we're going to explore these characters, which we do. So
yeah, like after having watched the season, if you had asked me like when was Princess Carolyn's first appearance, I wouldn't have remembered she was in episode 1. Like it would have been like, oh, well, episode 2 is her first. But they all the main cast fits in that 5-way call scene. So again, for a setup episode, that I guess it's like something that's needed, and it still brings a good levity in the middle of this. I do like your connection, April, you made of how BoJack deals with Jameson compared to Sarah Lynn, because looping back to what Sarah mentioned, right? Like BoJack is impulsed more so by the guilt he feels over Sarah Lynn rather than the action itself. Like it's more just like, well, I allowed this to happen, and so the reason he follows through with Jameson is like, oh, I don't want to be responsible for if you OD. Yeah. It's more like just like I don't care about. I mean, he
doesn't care what happens to Jameson. He cares what happens to himself based on what Jameson does.
Right. Right. So, but because of that, he has to follow along and tag along. But the difference is that A, he's maintaining himself sober, and B, because he's sober, he's able to provide slightly more mature advice than he has been able to do in the past. So that's why I guess it ends up being less worse for wear than it would have been in previous seasons. But it is interesting to see the parallels of how the motivations haven't really changed that much, at least in this opening of the season.
And I think there's a discussion there because we talked about it on the season-long podcast, whether like this is actually good what BoJack's doing, this like change he's trying for, like and I think this kind of digs into it. This first episode is that like is it still morally good that he's trying to change just because he feels bad? He doesn't want to feel bad about doing this to somebody. And I think that's like, does it matter? Like, does it matter that he's not trying to change just because he doesn't want to hurt people? Like, does it like people shouldn't be hurt? And I think that's just because I don't know if BoJack actually cares about Jameson in this episode. He seems to just care about himself.
I think I think Jameson's sort of like that, like he's projecting like that relationship that he had with Sarah Lynn onto Jameson. And so because like, I mean, he obviously like tries to help her, which he did with Sarah Lynn at one point. He tried to help her as well. And then like, it's kind of one of those like, oh, well, like it doesn't matter. And I think even though, you know, we still explore like the Sarah Lynn relationship kind of later, I think it's kind of him coming to an acceptance of like at a certain point, like you can't hold yourself responsible for other people. Especially later whenever like we have the whole situation with Dr. Champ. So, you know, like you can't, like that's not your fault kind of thing, because like the situation with Dr. Champ really wasn't his fault. The situation with Jameson really wasn't his fault. I mean, Sarah Lynn's situation, like
that was kind of his fault, though.
He influenced it. I would say more so like he influenced it versus like, I mean, no, it's like part. Yeah.
And that's the other big thing we talked about in the season-long discussion is that like BoJack's not malicious. He's never malicious in the way he hurts people.
Yeah.
He's just and that again is it. I don't think that matters. Like he's still hurting people from his just uncaring. Like there's like, it doesn't matter that he didn't want Sarah Lynn to die. She still died because of his actions. Like, and like, he's not completely to blame for the fact that Sarah Lynn is an addict or was an addict, but he had a role to play in this whole thing. Like he did that. And I think that's just like something he realizes that I think he's starting to realize in this episode and through the season that he's not a malicious person. Like he's not a bad person.
Yeah.
He's just, but the thing is, he's still doing these things and he needs to figure out why he's doing them.
Yeah. I think the other thing I'm really attached to he influenced Sarah Lynn more than he's directly responsible. Just because later on we I don't think it's in this episode, but we get an episode later with the water bottle filled with vodka, and then they're Sarah Lynn's sick because she drank from this. And so it's kind of interesting too, because we also see Sarah Lynn's first drink, which again is this central kind of theme of this episode at the same time. So
and it's from a similar water bottle, and so it's
and he's oh well, and then that also it explains later why he holds on to Jameson's water bottle full of vodka, and he says that it's a reminder of the past, and and we get that same visual with the stars in the water bottle shape kind of thing. So I think that again he's not malicious, but it's kind of he's not aware of the impact he has on other people. Which again, makes the whole rest of this season really interesting, is because we are seeing all of these individual characters, the 5 that, are in that, 5-way call, and we see how they fare without BoJack in their life, kind of. So, I don't know if there's anything to really be said to that. And I don't think that BoJack's ever malicious. It's just that, negativity is, it's contagious. So it spreads. And once you sort of remove the root of that, then you can start to, work to become a better, make your situation better. So.
But
I think some thoughts about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's fine.
I agree with a lot of what April said. I think for me, it's just the show to open with Sarah Lynn and then to close this half of the season on Sarah Lynn, I feel like if the big question is about will BoJack as a character / person be redeemed, is he on a path of redemption? I would say it is great and nice to see him trying to help other people, especially later in the season, people in his life like Diane. And Princess Carolyn. I mean, those are good active steps to take, but I feel like the show itself, and personally me, would say that he can't get redemption without owning up to the extent of the severity of his actions, and whether or not he was malicious in I mean, Sarah Lynn's death is the most pivotal example, right? You death is the farthest wrong you can do.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's a police ongoing investigation that's probably going to catch up with him the back half of the season implies to me that BoJack is going to have to face the ultimate consequence of, one, everyone he knows and cares about finding out the extent of the wrong that has befallen someone at the hands of him, and 2, him facing the consequences of potentially going to jail or something.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't feel bad if BoJack went to jail because, Sarah Lynn's her own adult person, but her relationship with BoJack is so fraught with she knew him as a child and he was a father figure, and then she was going to rehab and he pushed her to get back into drugs and alcohol, and she trusted him and they had sex. And I mean, it's not wholly his fault that she died, but it is definitely in that moment more his doing than anyone else's. And I think that's something BoJack has to be honest about. And I do like the fact that it hadn't occurred to me that BoJack was kind of being selfish, even now, about his reasons for helping Jameson because of how it reflects on him. But I think that's the ultimate barrier left for BoJack, because it doesn't matter how many nice things he does for other people. He's not going to get redemption until he owns up to the harm he's really done and face actual tangible consequences.
And
because when you do that much wrong, you can't just try to be better. You have to take your poison. You know?
You have to take ownership of what you did. Hold yourself accountable. I honestly, I would love if this show ends with him going to jail.
Me too. I think it's the best thing.
I think that And that's why I'm like so much pushing for this whole season or this half of a season, whatever, being like really about just like BoJack like internally like dealing with his own like psyche, because like that's what it is. But this first half is about that, and then the second half is about him dealing with himself in the vision of the public, like to everybody else. Because he apologizes to a lot of people this season. He deals with a lot of people, but it's always people he's invested in, friends with. Sarah, he tries to face the Sarah Lynn stuff. He tries to face his family stuff a couple times in this season, and then his friends. Like he goes out to them, reaches out to them, but he never goes further than that. He does the easy ones. He knows these people love him and want and know that there's this like kernel of goodness in him. That it's not just like that. Like he's not just like a monster, but that's what makes it work.
He is, I think, very carefully never told anyone about Sarah Lynn. And Diane found out about like the whole thing with the daughter of his old friend, like in a way that he never intended, and it totally freaked him out that she knew that. Like he's very carefully kept the darkest skeletons in his closet far away from everyone he cares about. And I feel like honestly, they should know about it if he really wants to come clean, honestly.
And I think that's true. But I think there is some, like, and honestly, Michelle, I agree with a lot what you're saying, but I think there's also some, like, argument for the fact that he needs to face this on his own terms first. He needs to come to terms with his own horribleness on his own terms. Yeah, and that's what this is. Like, this half of the season is BoJack coming to realize who he is with some amount of clarity. He's realized now, I'm not a bad person, but I am a bad influence. Like, I am a bad, like, there's things I do that hurt people, but it's not because I'm a bad person. It's because I don't think things through. I don't think about other people. I don't have empathy. And that's like a very different thing than just being this monster that he thinks everyone's going to see him as if he comes clean on all this stuff. But he needed to face that alone. And now that he's done that, he needs to do the harder step, which is actually accepting that he did these things still.
And accepting the consequences. Yeah. Because, like, the worst thing is if, like, he just never goes to jail or just never has, like, actual tangible consequences. Because you can be sorry and try to be better. But, again, like, depending on the amount of damage you've caused, that's not always enough. And I don't think it'd be enough for BoJack. But I agree that, he has to be able to mentally come to that place on his own first, so that he can take that next step. Because he can't take the next step, but he can't even take the first step, which is to try to stop being the terrible thing he thinks he is.
And briefly commenting on this particular episode's contribution to seeing BoJack's. No, it's good that we got the full season of vision out. Like April and Michelle haven't been able to describe their full season thoughts, but specifically with this episode with BoJack checking into rehab, you would think. I think that the episode tries to take both sides of the validity of rehab. Like in part, it uses BoJack to be like, hey, like this is an industry that profits off of repeat customers, but at the same time, it clearly shows us that BoJack is deflecting a lot of the time when they try to get to the roots of his issues. And because of that, we can't really say that the rehab is fully working, because it's fairly clear that BoJack isn't fully buying into it, in part due to just the cynicism that he carries around. So I do find it interesting that, like, even from the first episode, we're not really saying that rehab is the cure-all or that it's bullshit, but rather, like, in the middle where it's like BoJack needs to fully buy into it, and he's not capable of doing that because as was mentioned in that long discussion, he's not at the point in his life where, like, he's capable, where he's bringing himself to admit that he is in the wrong, or that I guess so also that he is just unwilling to touch on the parts of himself that make him that uncomfortable. He prefers to deflect and move off to jokes or to just some other topic to avoid thinking about it. So I think that this episode does a good job of laying that bare. Well, we've seen that in previous seasons, but I think here it kind of like makes it very clear that there's a middle ground that BoJack is currently at that's not as healthy as he could be.
And this episode very clearly states exactly what BoJack's doing that's wrong. Like other times, like, he's doing it, but the show doesn't always like point a finger at him and be like, yeah, hey BoJack, you're just deflecting all your problems away and you're not actually facing them. And like it does it maybe over the course of multiple episodes, but this episode just does it over and over and over and over. Like it just makes sure you know, hey, BoJack is deflecting. Like he's not actually facing his problems.
Yeah, and I think that's important at this stage in the show to just be like very bare with it. Like, look, this is what's going on, and I think that's important to show people that that's a common strategy, but it avoids you from getting into the roots of the problem. Without getting to the roots, you can't move forward, and that's part of BoJack in this season. Although we get like his personal flashbacks, it's just that he does not want to share this information with anybody. Like again, like it's interesting that a lot of this flashback stuff with BoJack, it's almost never BoJack telling anybody about this. It's always us going into his mind, into his memory. But we're the only ones that know this information.
Yeah.
No one around him is ever aware of any of this upbringing.
It's really hard to look at this like through the context of people who aren't people who know BoJack's story as intimately as the audience do, because like we know so much more than even like his therapists know about him.
Exactly, and so like it touches into BoJack. People can't help him if he does not share this information, and that's kind of the tragedy in part, and the sadness of not accepting as much help as you could receive. And I think that this episode with regards to Rehab shows a balanced view of that. I guess we can talk a little bit about the specifics of the flashbacks that we see with BoJack. I think the first one is going back to well, actually, at the very beginning,
the first one's Sarah Lynn.
Yeah, the very beginning of the episode is flashback to the night Sarah Lynn died, and we see him telling the police that he wasn't with her when she died.
Yeah, which is honestly something I can't believe we haven't talked about yet, because that's crazy. Like, it's the biggest deflection he does all like the whole show. He deflects from this like being responsible for her death. He literally does that at the start of the season.
Yeah, that was like really hard to watch, and then especially because like whenever he's talking to Jameson, he's like, I don't want to have to lie about your death, and I'm like, I mean, you don't have to lie about your death. Like you just assume she's going. Also, he just assumes she's going to OD. Like you know, like we never like. Especially, like, because whenever he, like, does, I guess, like, take her to that party, like, she doesn't touch anything. Like, she doesn't touch alcohol. She's not doing drugs. She's just there and being, you know, like, dramatic and upset and everything. And so, like, even whenever, like, he's like, all right, let's just go do it. Like, that's not even what she wants to, like, she doesn't even want to go drink or do drugs. She's like, I just want to go to my dad's house and destroy everything, or just, like, go home and be in my bed. Like, so I just think that's, like, crazy that he immediately goes to, like, the worst place, which would obviously be, like, ODing and dying like Sarah Lynn did.
But also, there's also this context that BoJack's ignoring, where she's like, Jameson, I don't know how old she is, but she's not like a guy that's about like at the like in the end of his life, essentially. Like BoJack, we really hammer in that he's old this season. Like he is old, and Jameson looks very young. Like I don't think she's a teenager, but she's
like 19 or something.
Yeah, she's really young, and there's a difference between. Like, I'm not saying like she's healthy right now, but there's a difference between getting blackout drunk when you're 19 and getting blackout drunk when you're like 60, like health wise, and like Jameson's still growing up is what I'm saying. Like she's learning like what she wants to do in her life.
She's supposed to be learning.
Yeah, but I mean, like what I'm saying is she hasn't had the amount of time BoJack has had to learn. Like the fact is, like there's this whole different amount of context where it's like she's made mistakes, but she's 19. Like she hasn't had a lot of time to make mistakes in general. Like it's just very different.
I think there's a line here where BoJack says like, I'm too old to be sneaking around. So like his sobriety is like partially inspired by the fact that he's a bit too old to even like be able to drink safely these days. So it's not entirely of his own accord. It's like there's health related reasons there as well. But So we have the beginning there. Also, just briefly, this is, I think, Officer Meow Meow's only appearance of the half season.
Yep.
I like that you noted that, Alex.
Yes, this is an important BoJack character, Officer Meow Meow. Very
He is
extremely important.
Yeah, very ignorant of BoJack being sketchy. It doesn't take any of these notes down, really. Just like stop talking. So.
He's like, I don't need to know anything more. Like, he literally tells him.
Yeah, so Officer Meow Meow, pinnacle of our police force at work. The second flashback is BoJack in his horsing around days. He has to kiss Cindy Crawfish, the animal version of Cindy Crawford.
Oh my god!
He actually did the voice for her. I saw it in the credits.
What?
Well, I mean,
oh my god!
Of all the celebrity cameos, I think that's one of the easier ones to get. Like, what is Cindy Crawford doing these days?
It's still funny every time they get a celebrity on this show.
Yeah. But the assistant, who we later learn in other episodes, is named Sharona. She sneaks vodka and orange juice to BoJack to loosen him up, and BoJack gets very kissy and wants more, and so we see fun drunk BoJack in this flashback.
I mean, it's
quote
like
fun.
Borderline, but it's mostly fine. Yeah.
Okay,
it's fun / creepy.
I'll agree that this is definitely the drinking that he does that's the least problematic.
Right,
but that's not saying a lot.
Well, yeah, but I mean more like in the framing of this episode, like we go backwards from like fun to mean to emotionally devastating.
But I mean, like I said, like we said at the start, like it does start with Sarah Lynn, like
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Like I think that this one is just. I think this one is worse with context. This one, like this thing with this flashback's a lot worse when you know this is after like Sarah Lynn drank alcohol, like, and he's still doing it. You know what I mean? Like this is after that, isn't it?
I don't know.
Because like it's hard to tell because everything's supposed to be in younger, right?
Yeah, like this is all in the horsing around days. Although I think that this is when Herb Gazaz is still on the show, and Sarah Lynn is when the sheep guy.
Okay, so that's this weird thing. So I guess like there's like this section of flashbacks that aren't going backwards; they start going forwards. Like this is a really weirdly constructed episode.
Well, I mean the Sarah Lynn the Sarah Lynn drinking isn't until like a later episode, I think. So that's why. Like,
is it
trying to fit?
Okay.
Yeah, but trying to fit that into here might get a little confusing. But like, I give this episode that I think it's fairly linear. But
yeah, no, you're right. I'm sorry, I was mixing up episodes. They all kind of. Binging episodes is hard.
Yeah.
Yes, it really is.
Well, later we have a nerdy teen BoJack. He's awkward at the party, and he accepts a beer because there's a girl who wants to impress, and then he begins making fun of everyone, including Katie, very maliciously. And so I guess this is a mean drunk BoJack. The beginnings of that. This was hard to watch.
Oh man,
it was so awkward, which I think it was supposed to be.
Yes.
We go further back. We see a kid BoJack bringing a dad lunch, and he comes to see dad having sex with secretary. I wrote down the line "coats it out of my sheath" because it's one of the creepiest things I've ever heard.
Oh my god!
Weird.
It's what makes you think like it's horse dick. Coats it out.
Okay.
But yeah, so for dad makes BoJack forget he ever saw this by giving him Jack and Coke and helping him pass out. So that's a great kid memory to have. And then finally you have like little baby BoJack just seeing his parents passed out after I think like some kind of party, like New Year's party. And
something.
So he takes a sip of the vodka and then like snuggles up. That's his drunk, passed out mom.
And he's like trying to pretend like his mom. He's trying to pretend his mom would cuddle with him, essentially.
Yeah.
I no joke almost cried because that was so hard to watch.
It was really, really bad.
Yeah. And like that's how the episode ends. Like it just ends with the little BoJack curled up in there, and then the final film burned to black. So. Yeah, that's rough. His
parents were so shitty. Gosh.
An eternal motto of the show. Parents shitty.
Weird.
Let's hear anything else from this episode. I mean, just like random gags. I mean,
There's some good gags in this
yeah,
episode.
like the groundhog is funny. He's very insistent on the selfie. He just pops out of places. This is the introduction of Dr. Champ. I don't think he doesn't do that much in this first episode. It's like the introduction of him using folksy sayings that don't mean anything. But
I liked the montage of like, it was like hiking therapy, sleeping therapy, like group therapy.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought that was really funny. And it's like set to like fun music and everything, but like BoJack's just miserable.
Throwing up everywhere, going through alcohol withdrawal.
Yep.
Yeah. And and just briefly, when the Jameson is going out to find her ex, she finds her ex making out with a mosquito lady, and they're making.
Oh my god, this is so good.
Like, there's like. First, it's like they're biting the neck, and then it's like the sucking mouth kiss. So like it's like a bunch of different ways of making out in like 5 seconds. Like even BoJack like keeps like coming in and out of the room to be like watching them. Like, oh,
I think he's like a little concerned. She's like sucking his blood out.
But oh my god, it's so weird.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
She's a mosquito girlfriend. Of course she's gonna suck all your blood.
Yeah.
And of course BoJack.
She's like a real life vampire.
Yeah.
But of course BoJack later is like, your friend sucks. Like,
she literally.
So,
literally.
Yeah. So, anything else from this episode you guys want to touch on before we move on?
No.
Was there any?
Okay.
There was no gags this episode. Oh, Diane falling asleep on the 5-way call is probably my favorite moment of this entire episode. I don't know. Falling over sleep is really good.
Yeah. Todd does a whole story about a hacky sack and like defeating the
Did not like
Russians.
stay awake for it at all.
Aren't you like the world's greatest hacker? Well,
Let me tell you.
I hacked a sack.
Great. And the Russian guy died of a heart attack. I won by default.
Todd failing upwards, even in the land of hacky sack. So we have the new client here. At the beginning, we talked a lot about Princess Carolyn, and I think the hallmark of this episode is the representation of her split up into a lot of different colored versions of herself. As far as I could tell, like there were like differentiations between the colors. Like the blue Princess Carolyn's would be one specifically doing motherly tasks, and I think was the purple ones doing like workly tasks. But like the part that I appreciate is like we get introduced to these like one at a time, but then by like once we get like near the end of the episode or past halfway,
so
like
many.
there's so many, and they're all like beginning to get into like constrained spaces. Like there's a shot I remember of like her in the car, I think as she's driving to go pick up Mr. Peanutbutter, and like there's like 15 different Princess Carolyns inside that car doing like a bunch of different things at once. And so like all that combined with also like the sound design, like there's like lots of echoes going on in the background or like whispers. So like all that just contributes to like, I describe it as just like this episode made me very anxious watching it the first time.
It was very like overwhelming. I will say, like the first time I watched it, I did not like it. I was like, this is my least favorite episode. Yeah. Just because like it made me extremely anxious. Like there was a lot going on, and also like the repeating sort of like soundtrack of like, you know, her
the
like
baby crying.
Yeah, like the baby crying and all of that. Like it was very overwhelming and it made me very anxious, and I did not like it. But the second time I watched it, I guess it was kind of also like I was like, okay, April, like you gotta get yourself in this mindset kind of thing. And so then like after that second watch, I was like, okay, like this is a good episode. So and even though like I still felt like all of that same anxiety, and it's like interesting because I feel like this episode is like the representation of how I feel about having kids. So
I think that's fair, yeah, because I think a lot of that anxiety is supposed to be us tapping into Princess Carolyn's actual mental state the entire episode, which is very chaotic and stress-inducing and not fun at all.
Like, I want to, like, because, like, I would like to have kids, but right now I can't even fathom it, and my husband doesn't understand that, and so I just want to show him this episode and be like, how does this episode make you feel? Like, this is the, like, physical representation of how having kids makes me feel. So.
I'm sorry, April. How did your husband not have an idea of how fucking stressful kids could be?
Well, he gets that, but, like, he understands.
Has he never been a kid? Does he understand how?
Well, it's funner to be a kid than to have to take care of a little kid.
Oh yeah, I know how horrible I was.
Also, I have extreme anxiety, so.
Yeah, same.
Also, in this show, Princess Carolyn in previous seasons, like, very much idolized the idea of wanting to be a mom, and like she kind of like she knew that these negatives were going to come, but she thought it was worth it for the positives of like her fulfilling her goal, right? So now we see her in the middle of it, and we see her having to deal with why doesn't this feel the way I thought it would feel. So I think that that's kind of a thing all parents at some point must feel, right? Because I mean, like I will say as well, like I'm obviously never going to be a mother, but this episode I think transmitted as well as it possibly could to someone who will never experience motherhood the feeling of it, because like it does feel like a bunch of different attacks coming from different angles. So like I think that that's kind of the genius of this episode, that even if you have not experienced it, but I think they put you in such a specific mindset that no matter where you're coming from, you get a general sense of how it must feel.
And I like that because, like, Alex, you were just saying how Princess Carolyn, she's talked about wanting to be a mom before, and she had this idea of how it would be, and I'd say, like, this episode did a good job of pinpointing, like, this is how much it actually, like, is a rough time, though, no matter who you are and how much you love your kid. Like, it's gonna kind of suck a lot, and that's actually normal, because a lot of times when we hear about parenthood, it's just kind of glossed over, like, oh, it's great, it's fine, it's the best thing in the world, don't worry about it. And, like, but actually, it's hard.
Well, and, like, everyone's way of, like, I guess, like, complaining is they're like, oh, sometimes it can be really rough, but it's totally worth it.
Totally rewarding.
And I think that, like, people, like, legitimately do have, like, kind of, like, the regret, you know what I mean? And we get that with, like, Princess Carolyn in this episode is, like, this is what it's really like. Because the other thing, too, that I think is really important is that, like, she still, like, has to work. Like, she's a single parent. And so it's like that's a modern, like, representation. Like, women still have to work, you know, or still want to work even though they have a kid. And so, you know, and people, like, especially, like, baby boomers are like, oh, well, you just think you can have it all. And, like, that's kind of like like the thing is her trying to quote unquote have it all. You know, having a kid, having a career, but, like, it's not easy. And, like, you know, for instance, like, my mom, like, she didn't have to work when I was a kid until later. And so, like, it's easy for her to just be like, oh, like, whenever you have kids, like, you can just stop working. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works. Like, I'm still going to have to work. Like,
and that's just the money side of things. Like, that's not like the emotional investment side of things. That's not the, like,
the planning and organizing.
Yeah. It's a job in of itself, and it's a responsibility. And I'm not saying that can't be rewarding, but it's like Princess Carolyn wasn't. I'm not saying Princess Carolyn didn't know that. I'm saying that, like, it's easy to look at the good sides of having a kid, like and for Princess Carolyn, there's a lot of them. And that was all in previous seasons. But in the moment, she's just seeing the bad, because there's a lot of hard parts of being a mom or being a parent in general. Because I think there's a lot in this episode that's not just mom; it's also just parent. Like, I think there's some stuff in this episode that's, like, very much about how moms are portrayed in media, but also just the way. But Princess Carolyn's actual problems, I think, are just general single parent problems.
Yeah. Well, and I think they're, like, it's, like, single, like, parent problems, and also, like, the, like, like female, like you said, like media portrayal of like being a mom and not just being single, but also just being a mom and being, like invested in your career and being successful in a sense. So, and like
specifically being the woman who has it all, right?
Yeah. And I think like her, like the whole like photo shoot thing, like being featured in a magazine as a woman who has it all, like I loved that, because she's just like, no, this isn't what it's like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I wish it could be picture perfect, but it's not that way. So and then her even just coming to like those terms is like, it's such like a motivating moment, you know what I mean? Like, she's like, this is what it's really like. Like, it's not what I thought it was going to be, kind of thing.
Yeah. But people still expect it to be that way. It's crazy.
Well, that's why I love that she confides in Vanessa Gecko, because Vanessa Gecko is her peer. She's also a full-time working mother who I think is single too. I don't remember if I've ever seen Vanessa's partner.
I think she's had a partner in previous seasons,
but not currently.
But not currently. Like, when
Vanessa really is like the wiser version of her, in a very similar place in her life, doing about the same amount of things that she is. So she's the perfect person to give her like the real down low on how motherhood's actually going to be for her, and she does not sugarcoat it. She's like, look, yeah, you got to treat it like a job. And that's not wrong. And don't be hard on yourself for not thinking, what you assume are terrible thoughts about not being in love with your child every second of the day. Because like, the most important thing is to just do the work the best you can. You don't have time to second guess yourself. And that is enough. And don't feel bad about it. And that's exactly what Princess Carolyn needed to hear. And I think that's a big reason that she's able to go home and like, start to realize, like, okay, yeah, like, oh, you like it when I, like, say funny, fast sentences? Good! Like, I figured out a thing that you like, and I'm gonna try to do that more. Like, also, like, she's a new parent, and I feel like having your first kid and the first time of doing everything, it's gonna be pretty overwhelming regardless.
Yeah.
And
I think the other thing, too, like, to make note is, like, she also adopted a kid. Yeah. So, like, this, obviously didn't, and that may also be like part of like her mindset too, is that like this did not come out. I say come out of her. It was not produced by her.
I'm sorry.
It was not physically pulled out of her.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but like it, I feel like that it's different whenever like there's a different, because like she sort of feels like that disconnection too. Like you get that because like, okay, she has like a porcupine baby. Yes. So like she has to wear gloves to hold her own child. Like
metaphor. Like it's very good.
Yeah. Like I thought that like again, like this is why like this I'm getting even more hype about this episode the more we talk about it, just because like it has all of this like beautiful representation of like real life like within it. Like she can't even hold her own kid, and that sort of like helps represent like that distance that parents have, whenever they do adopt a kid, because that's hard. Like it's hard, like it's hard to like you didn't get like the 9 months of like it developing and growing inside of you, like to feel that initial connection. And so then like, it's almost like, oh, like you just chose to take this upon yourself, and then you feel guilty for not, and instantly. I mean, obviously she loves and cares about Ruthie, but like she feels, you can tell that she feels bad because like, one, she hasn't named her kid. Two, like
there's an amount of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so it's really it's kind of like a small representation of like postmortem depression. So like postpartum, sorry. Words.
No worries.
I was like
just push it out of you. It's okay.
Yeah, like but so like it's kind of like in a way like that small sort of like representation of that as well, like because like she's obviously like stressed, she feels she feels like the weight of all of this, and that's what happens to like new moms, is that it becomes too much, and then they feel depressed, and that's a thing. So
I definitely felt that stuff with the adoption thing. Like, it definitely feels like there's this. It's a tough subject because, like, obviously adopted parents are still parents, and like that's like their love is real. But there's this, when you have a kid, like, there are some quick, like, shortcuts you can make, because this is a person who shares genetics with you. There's this person, like, you can see a lot of yourself in this person. And when you have an adopted child, it's like it feels at first like, here's this child, they're nothing like me. They're nothing like me at all. They're this child that just got dropped in my lap and I have to care for them. And it doesn't seem like there'd be this big difference, but when you're the parent, like, you feel like there's all these enormous differences, even though you're kind of like reaching for it. And then by the end of the episode, Princess Carolyn realizes that this child is a lot like her, or at least has this similarity to her. And there's no way to know whether a biological child of Princess Carolyn would have this many differences or not. It's just, there's all this, like, very obvious difference from being a porcupine that makes it hard to look past that and be like, oh, this child likes wordplay just as, like, finds my wordplay really funny, and that's cool. Like, that's something I connect to, and I think there's a lot of undertone of that through this episode. I agree.
And speaking to that, like, adopting her, like, I find it interesting that we don't get to the name Ruthie until the very end, where she finds this similarity, considering that, like, in a previous season, like, Ruthie was the name she already had for kind of her idealized version of a child. It's not until the end of this episode that she gets to the place where she's comfortable enough to use that name for this baby. So that's kind of an interesting way to frame it.
It really feels like imposter syndrome. Like, she doesn't feel like she's allowed to be the full mom of this child. And then she realizes, like, this is my child. This is my child, even though I feel this way. Like, this is a valid feeling I have, but this is Ruthie.
And that's why it's so uplifting at the end, and I love it. Go Princess Carolyn!
But by the way, like, a minor point with regards to the conversation she has with Vanessa Gecko, it also speaks to kind of a maturity of Princess Carolyn as well, that, like, in previous seasons, she would never, in her eyes, it would be stooping to ask Gecko for advice for something. But she's at this point in her life now where she's been humbled enough to be like, okay, I can accept needing to go to Gecko to ask for help with something as personal as this. And, like, and that moment where it's like, wow, why did I end up hating you for so long? It's also, like, kind of a small commentary on, like, the viciousness of business. They're, like, people who probably would be very good friends. You know, part of the ego prevents that from ever happening, but because of this new experience, she's able to reach out, and that's also something important, you know, like, reaching out to people who have similar experiences and can provide important perspective like that. So
especially like with women, because so often, especially like in a professional sense, women get pitted against each other, and so I think that's even more, like, refreshing when she has this conversation, and it sort of, like, comes to light too, because Vanessa Gecko even says, like, well, I never hated you, like, you know what I mean, like. So, like, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I feel this so hard. Like,
yeah, I thought that was a really good moment, just specifically that line.
Yeah, and you could even, like, see the shock, like, with Princess Carolyn, like, oh my gosh, like.
And she believes it, though. She doesn't, like, question it.
She doesn't question it because Vanessa Gecko doesn't hate her. But it, like, I guess, like, that's just, like, the thing, though, is that women so often just get pitted against each other, especially, like, when, you know, in business and, like, professionally, that, like, you're like predisposed to, like, hate the other women in, like, you know, a similar work position or profession or whatever, and then, like, come to realize, like, hey, like, you have all of these things, like, actually in common, and, like, this is a person that, like, you could have had as, like, a support system this entire time. So I just, like, it again, like another great moment in this amazing episode.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about Princess Carolyn. Just briefly touching on the other pieces of this amazing episode. April, how much in love were you with the setup for Mr. Peanutbutter's arc this season in this episode?
So I think it's really interesting because, okay, so the other interesting thing too is that we have a lot of setup. So like the tie-in between like with the first episode is that we like when we get introduced to Princess Carolyn, she like Todd is like getting black market like porcupine milk for her.
Right.
So like that's almost like an initial like you like blink into like Princess Carolyn's having like child problems, you know what I mean? Or like she's having difficulty adjusting. And so I think that this Mr. Peanutbutter stuff, like, oh my gosh, I like it's funny because I'm like, wow, I remember how much I hated you last season.
I still hate him mostly.
I mean, I still do too, but I just like it was like a really like I was like, wow, like I don't like you, like so. And but then at the same time, like I was like, okay, like at least like we're going to address this and we're going to explore it, because I remember being extremely frustrated at the end of last season because he like goes to tell Pickles and then he like just ends up proposing to her, and I was just like, wow, like we're just not gonna do this, like what's happening here? So I like that we understand that he feels all of this guilt, and I'm like I was really like hopeful. I was like, hopefully we get to address this, and then we do. So that was like a relief for me.
Okay, and I will say as well, like Peanutbutter is a lot more tolerable when he actually has like visible faults that we can see. Because like earlier in the show, like he was always happy-go-lucky, very, but at the same time, like he was very he was unaware of the effect he had on other people, and that in itself made you a bit angry. But at least here, he like knows he did something wrong, and it's eating at him. So I kind of prefer seeing that sort of a character to one who's oblivious to the harm they're doing. So that part is nice. I'll say that the scene between him and BoJack, where like BoJack notices that like Peanutbutter is off, and he gives the advice like, "Hey, look, I've been there. Bottling up your guilt ain't gonna help. It infects everything." And Peanutbutter is just like sitting there and like taking that in. So like that was a very heartfelt moment that like actually this entire season, like BoJack and Peanutbutter, the few moments that they get together feels very like a lot more emotional than it's ever been, because also there's that crossover episode thing later on in the season. So like BoJack and Peanutbutter are where they begin.
I was gonna say this is where they begin. Like BoJack finally allows himself to connect with like Mr. Peanutbutter.
Yeah.
So because again, like, you know, pitting characters against each other and like the horrors of like any professional environment or business environment is that you end up being pitted against somebody else that would have otherwise been a really good friend. And so I enjoyed, while I don't like Mr. Peanutbutter, I enjoyed like seeing BoJack and Mr. Peanutbutter like grow closer, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah. Sarah, any thoughts on Mr. Peanutbutter? Maybe you want to comment on his meme explanation. I don't know.
Mr. Peanutbutter, he is. It's hard for me to talk about him just in reference to this one episode, because the longer I stay on Mr. Peanutbutter, the more I dislike him.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Like, he's a bad person. Like, he hasn't done anything nearly as bad as
he hasn't killed anyone.
Yeah, which is
indirectly.
Like, which is really a line that he has not crossed. But like, he is somehow less introspective than BoJack, which is fucking amazing, honestly.
Yeah,
and it makes it very hard for me to talk about BoJack. Mr. Peanutbutter. That's what I'm trying to say.
Like, I wish I could just be so, like, I feel like I'm, like, constantly, like, evaluating. I'm like, okay, if I say this, okay, I think that Sarah may react this way and Michelle may react this way. Like,
That's right now.
Like hyper aware. And so like to just be completely oblivious, I'm like, wow, how do you get to that mindset? That's crazy.
Because I don't think he knows anything. Like
I always keep coming back to last season when Diane lays out for him, like when he's like, why don't my wives keep leaving me? What's wrong with them? And she's like, they keep outgrowing you because you're really immature and they're just turning into actual normal adult women and you make them feel terrible about that. So they divorce you. You find another young, impressionable wife. And
she says the line about like your wives stay the same age, but you don't, like, or something like to that effect. Because I remember like her delivering that line, and I was like, "Oh, that's so great!" Like,
yeah. I think that's like part of it because like I will say I appreciate Mr. Peanutbutter like. Feeling guilty and acknowledging that he's done this wrong thing and trying to honestly make amends in a really wacky way, letting Pickles like sleep with 23 people, which is like kind of hilarious. And it's like, fine, it's their relationship. They can fix this however they want. But on the other hand, there's still that looming thing that I don't know is ever going to be resolved. And it just gets back to what Sarah's saying about Mr. Peanutbutter. He's not that introspective. And I don't think he really owns up to his side of problems, which is a point of maturity. I don't think he's very mature as a person. And that's a big part of my dislike for him because he's not as old as BoJack, I don't think, but he's like at least in his 40s. He's old enough. He's like 20 years old enough to like have most of himself figured out. And the fact that he doesn't just like makes him incredibly unlikable right now.
Well, it's interesting too because like I feel like Mr. Peanutbutter and BoJack are like they're going through like a similar thing, but not quite the same. Like not to the same degree, because like obviously like we already discussed about how like BoJack's like having problems. Like his struggle is, owning like the terrible things that he has done. But like at the same time, Mr. Peanutbutter is doing something of like similar nature. Like he's not owning the fact that like he cheated. And like, that's great that, later down the road, like he tries to fix that with Pickles. But like, it's not like at the end of the day, like you still have to own, like you can't just like be like, yeah, do whatever you want if that's how you feel it's going to make it better, but you still have to like take responsibility for your actions.
Yeah, and like this whole BoJack deflecting in episode 1, like we see that in episode 2 with Mr. Peanutbutter, right? Like he's sort of about to admit it to Pickles, but then like finds a way out and is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go hang out with BoJack instead to avoid the problem. And in the beginning of this episode, it opens with him like focusing on some minor thing in the movie that he's doing to like because his guilt is consuming him. Like that's totally something we would have seen BoJack do in like older seasons, be like hyper focused on a detail that doesn't matter, but because like something else is bothering him that he doesn't really want to deal with. So we're seeing Mr. Peanutbutter kind of go through the same things that BoJack goes through, and it kind of puts them on a bit more of an even field, which maybe is why BoJack and Mr. Peanutbutter are finally like beginning to hang out, because now they're both in like somewhat closer levels of guilt propelling their actions.
But I think that's just like Mr. Peanutbutter, like the way he acts just like leads to people leaving him before he gets the chance to do something horrible to them. Like BoJack, like, BoJack, people leave him because he does something horrible, because they see him and they're like, there's something good in this guy, I can make him better, or like I can help him, or there's just something good here and I like him. But Mr. Peanutbutter, you're like, the surface is I like this guy, and then you leave because you realize, oh, I don't really like him that much, before he does anything horrible, because that's just his baseline. His baseline is just, I'm a happy guy and I'm going to be nice to everybody.
And if you're upset, there must be something wrong with you, wife, because I'm so happy and why aren't you? You must be a stick in the mud now. I don't know what changed, but it must be your fault.
But it's not, but it means that he's always consistent. He's not like, explosive or damaging in the way BoJack is. He's just the same person all the time, and that's what I think all the ex-wives realize now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, other like random stuff from this episode. There's the whole Todd plot line, which is him selling the Untitled Princess Carolyn project as a movie, and classic Todd hijinks, very quick, which I think like helps it to go by down smoother than perhaps older Todd hijinks. But this eventually ends up in like Princess Carolyn being able to sell Birthday Dad as a TV show in replacement. Let's hear Flea Daniels. Lee Daniels as a flea, voiced by Lee Daniels. He is exasperated by all this, and he goes to direct the Diary of Anne Frankenstein.
This is so bad that I can't believe someone actually has not made this thing. Like someone has not,
right?
Yeah.
Like it's terrible because whenever I heard that title, I was like, oh man, I'd watch that movie.
And Frankenstein.
A lot of people would watch it, and that's why I'm surprised it doesn't exist.
Look,
Right.
people of the world, make this movie.
I'm not saying I would watch it, but I think there is an audience for it, and I'm not sure I like that.
And it could star Chloe Grace Moretz in real life too, as she also voices Anne Frankenstein in here for one line. So we got that. Let's hear. There's a moment where Princess Carolyn puts Ruthie in the microwave and is petting a burrito.
I like gasped in horror when that happened. Like, I guess Ruthie's not scarred for life, but she did turn very bright pink, and I was like, oh, poor baby.
Yeah,
It's a little more than a poor baby.
It's more of an baby.
Baby.
Let's hear. Todd is eating spaghetti and Reese's peanut butter cups. Would anybody dare to eat that combination in real life? Anybody?
No,
Anybody?
For money?
Good.
Yeah,
Not us.
absolutely.
Oh, okay,
Most
money,
things are
yes.
fine by themselves. Yeah, if you pay us enough, we'll eat it.
Yeah, I feel like there's got to be like a pasta recipe that incorporates chocolate in a way that's good, but I can't really think of that.
Maybe like a dessert pasta.
Yeah, definitely dessert.
Yeah.
There's dessert pastas.
There's dessert
Okay.
pizza.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Italian.
not pizza. That's like it's like faux pizza.
Well, but like you would just think of like the pasta like as the breading of a pie.
Okay,
Yeah.
I looked up pasta with chocolate, and chocolate spaghetti came up, and I'm scared.
Oh,
It's
no.
like brown
Oh, no.
spaghetti, and that
Uh,
scares me.
Okay, but now check up if anybody puts peanut butter cups on pizza. Does anybody do that?
I'm sorry. I'm still
It
obsessed
melts?
with chocolate spaghetti.
Well, see, if it melts, it's perfect because like it blends with the cheese, chocolate and
They put
cheese.
I don't know if
Oh my god, okay. I'm
It's like
sorry.
a fondue.
They sprinkle powdered sugar on it instead of Parmesan cheese. And as much as this sounds disgusting, that's
boy.
really
It kind of
funny.
does.
It sounds terrible.
It does.
It does look like a good hangover snack for some reason, though. Maybe that's what Todd was doing. Maybe that was his hangover food.
I wish I could show the listeners this image of this pasta because it's making me like really sick.
Okay, well, at least post it in the Skype
Yeah,
chat.
post it in the
so
Skype
for
chat,
our
I want to
benefit.
see this picture. Also, we can
well,
put it
well-
up on Twitter.
While you look up that picture, also there's like a comforting
Oh.
moment where BoJack calls Princess Carolyn to apologize for making life difficult. Princess Carolyn saying she would have come to the friends and family if BoJack had said something. BoJack
Yeah.
was grateful.
Yeah.
That was just a very nice moment. The chocolate spaghetti has been posted.
That actually looks
It's-
pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, no.
I thi-
That's what makes
Yeah.
it scary because I know it looks okay, but I know it tastes vile.
Well, think about it. It's just like wheat and chocolate and more chocolate. Is that so bad? No.
Well, I mean,
that's
I
not-
can't
that's
eat
not too
wheat
bad.
and I hate chocolate,
Oh.
so yes.
Well,
that
then
sounds
for
really
Sarah
bad.
specifically, that would be terrible.
It's like wheat, so it makes me think like is it like a chocolate donut but like processed into noodles.
I
Like,
mean,
is
they're
it-
wet. The noodles are wet.
Well,
like-
we don't know they're wet. Maybe
How
they're
do you
dry.
not? How do you make pasta not wet?
You
Uh,
let it dry.
dry pasta is like crunchy.
Yeah.
Well, you cook
If
it
it's
and then let it dry.
chocolate, wouldn't it get like it would sort of like I say dry, but like harden as one giant piece? Like you couldn't eat those.
Oh, eventually. Yeah. Well,
Also,
Oh,
I'm
no.
that there's like powdered sugar on top of it, and it's supposed to be Parmesan cheese or something.
Yeah, no, that's
yeah, that's totally right.
Oh my god. Okay, this one's worse. This is fettuccine, and I don't like it.
Well, that's a little unappetizing just because the nudes are so like big and flat, and that just.
Let me just say what you're thinking. It looks like shit. Okay.
No, it looks
It
like
does.
seaweed, kind of. I don't know.
It's stringy shit.
None of this looks good.
Like, for
I'm
some
not.
reason,
I want to say this is amazing auditory, like.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't talk about this too long on the podcast.
Look, the point of the matter is that Todd is eating spaghetti and Reese's peanut butter cups, and we as a podcast do not approve.
It really
Because-
don't.
This isn't chocolate. I think it's fine. Just no tomato sauce. Just the noodles themselves and peanut butter cups.
Separately.
I think that's okay. I think that's actually okay.
But I mean, like, just
Fine.
do them separately. Like you could just do it.
But he doesn't want to. He wants everything in one bowl, easier to
With
wash.
marinara sauce.
No.
Okay. Final note. There's Diane's appearance in this episode is her calling in to recommend random names. We have Jacinda as from the New Zealand Prime Minister, Ravital, which is like a Hebrew name, and what about Lucretia? Any thoughts on these name recommendations or alternatives to Ruthie that you would have considered?
No, I think Ruthie was the right choice.
Okay.
She named it. I mean, she should have named him like Spike or something.
Spike? No! Just she's a hedgehog? I feel like that would tease her forever. I'm glad that's not her name.
I mean, that's why I'm not a parent, Michelle. That's why I never want to be a parent.
You just won't be in charge of naming the babies.
Well,
I mean, like,
but also, I wonder, like, why was Diane like, obviously these names are great for your kid. Like,
I think she just thought they were like cool names, either of like significant women in history, or they just sounded really badass. So that was her criteria.
Diane really wants for herself.
I think so, yeah.
And like, as someone who just randomly chose her name, like on a day, like, I think Diane just needs to realize you can just change your name. It's complete bullshit anyway. Like, you can just go down to the courthourthouse and tell someone, "Hey, my name's gonna be this." And as long as you're not doing it for illegal reasons, no one gives a shit.
That's true.
Although, well, no, like she uses Jacinda, and she's like the prime minister who had a baby while in office. So, like, that particular one does seem like she's recommending it specifically. Like, hey, Princess Carolyn, this is representing you, like, sort of thing. Instead of like thinking about the baby, it's more like, hey, look, this is someone you can aspire to be, sort of thing. Which I don't know if it's a great baby naming technique, but I guess you gotta start somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what? Ruthie feels normal.
Normal?
It does. Yeah,
that's
the thing. Like, it's special enough that she's not gonna have a million kids in her class named Ruthie, but it's not like outlandish enough that it doesn't make like no sense for her to be named it.
Okay.
Like, why would Ravital be a good name for the abundance of dew? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Like, it has to be
Does
very.
she drink a lot of Mountain Dew?
No, she's just very moist.
Oh gosh.
Okay, I feel really connected to this conversation because there's a big, like, discussion of whether you should have, like, a unique name as a trans person or, like, just be, like, stealth and have, like, a normal name. And it's, like, a horrible battle because you're like, do I want to be, like, super cool and, like, stick out? Or I just want to be like, I'll just be, like, Sarah. It's fine. Because it's, like, I know people with names that are completely crazy. Like, just some completely crazy names. It's insane.
I mean, this one has Princess Carolyn. Like, Princess is her first name, right? So, like,
this is a little crazy. In this world's a little different. The world of BoJack Horseman's like,
Yeah, it's
There's
a unique world.
there's a different level. But I mean, like, this is supposed to be like a normal name, and yes, Ruthie is like a good level of normal and weird, and that's good. Like, this is a good name.
yeah.
Like an old fashioned. It's like an old person name, and I love when
You're
people
right. Oh man, you're right.
Well,
Oh no,
I
this
love
it's
old people
old-fashioned, and that fits with Princess Carolyn's kind of whole deal, right? Like, she's
Yeah.
kind of an old-timey person, and she'll probably, like, teach her kid to like old-timey Hollywood. So, you know, I can see that.
yeah,
But,
it's a rich person name. You're right.
yeah.
a rich person name.
And on that
Like,
note, considering that BoJack
like
Horseman,
this is an daughter's name. Like, this is someone who's like in Hollywood and just like, yeah.
Yeah, that is the context with which we must watch all BoJack Horseman. That this is all about rich people. So on that note,
I mean, like, Carolyn's not like super rich, but she's probably more rich than any of us.
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michelle, any final thoughts before we begin signing off here?
I like both of these episodes a lot. I like them even more after talking about them. I am looking forward to the rest of the season. I'm really liking this season. It's, again, a relief to not just have terrible trash fire sadness as just the main through line for once. And saying, like, all these characters doing a bit better and supporting each other more and knowing themselves better. Because, again, this is the 6th season. Like, it's about damn time. And it is a relief, and I'm happy. And I want to see more of it.
Okay. April?
Just that these 2 episodes were wonderful. Like, and I'm even more in love with the new client. So it was a very, very strong. Like, both of these episodes were extremely strong, and I love whenever like a show like starts off strong at the beginning of a season. Even like the 6th season in, and I would rival like these are some of the best episodes of BoJack Horseman. So.
Okay. Sarah?
I like these episodes. I think I like episode 2 more after talking about it, but I still like episode 1 more because I feel more I resonate more with this episode. Not that I'm like a crazy addict and like have killed people, but like I find it harder to connect with the kid stuff. But after talking about it, like I do like this episode a lot more than I did coming in, which I think is good. I think this is a good way to start a season. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. And I'd agree that, like, after talking it through, the new client definitely feels like even better of an episode than I thought it was. Like, after this, like, I think I'd be a lot more comfortable saying that this is the best Princess Carolyn episode, which I feel like
there's a lot of good ones.
There's a lot of good ones. Like, it's tough competition, right? But like, and I feel like
so good.
Right, and I feel like we've said it after every single Princess Carolyn episode. Like, each one is the best Carolyn episode. But like, I think that this has an argument.
So, what is it? It's the very first Princess Carolyn episode in season 1. Because like I remember I tried watching the show.
Is that her birthday one?
I think that's one that ends like it's like
Happy Birthday, Princess Carolyn at midnight, and she's by herself in the office.
Yeah. Because I remember I watched like the first 2 episodes of BoJack Horseman, like season 1, and I was like, I'm not into the show. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this again. And it wasn't until like I hit that episode that I was like, I love this show. Like, I need more of it. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of contenders for sure, but yeah, This was a really good episode to talk about. But if you want to find more of our discussion on BoJack Horseman and other animated shows, you can do that at overlyanimated.com. You can join us on Discord if you want to chat with us about animation. We have a BoJack-specific channel as well at overlyanimated.com/Discord. You can always support us financially via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all of our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Lily, aka Panda Lily. Thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Ryan, Steve, Beatrice, Hugh, Michael, and Needle. The Needles was briefly mentioned as a potential name for Princess Carolyn's baby at the beginning of this episode.
Oh, right, I forgot.
Good thing that was not selected, but for the jokes. But and we will definitely be discussing more BoJack Horseman in the upcoming weeks. We might be a bit slow, but we'll do these group of episodes. And let us know what you think about this specific discussion. Feel free to comment if you're listening on YouTube or on your preferred podcatcher. Leave us a review and let us know what you think about this discussion. But know that we had a fun time talking about it because BoJack is a show with a lot of different themes to discuss. And we will be back to talk about that in episodes 3 and onward in the future. But until then, thanks for listening and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.